So you're listening to 94.4 FM Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi. And in today's show, we've got an action-packed show lined up for you. Our first guest is a really interesting guest who's going to talk about his role as a coach and give us insight into attributes that scouts look for in terms of players, and it's really fascinating, I think, for all the listeners listening today, because we're going to get a really interesting perspective on player development, but also coaching too, and the sort of attributes that scouts may look for in terms of identifying talented players. So today's guest is Premier League Primary Stars coach Scott Hoather. Welcome to the show, Scott. Great to have you on board.
Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to have you on board, Scott, because you've done different roles in the game. Your role now is with Premier League Primary Stars as a coach. Tell us about the role that how you got into the role that you're doing now for our listeners.
So basically, I started about 10 years ago with university. I wasn't quite sure what I really wanted to do in terms of do I want to go into the elite side of the game, or is it where the community side of the game. I've kind of ventured out across to the States. I've done some recreation work in terms with the football, or soccer as they call it out there. Which is great. It's a good experience for me to understand the different cultures out there, how they see football. So it was a good way of expressing myself as a coach. I've come back to the UK, and I've kind of had roles in both the elite and the community side, which is a nice trait to have, really, because with the football, it's so into the community now, and how it reaches out to everybody. So it's a massive pull. So it was a fascinating role. So where I live, there's a little club down the road called Chester. They're in the National League at that point, which is just outside the Football League. Yeah. And I've done some voluntary work out there, with the it wasn't so much an academy, because there was no funding from the EPPP. It was all run by volunteers, which is there's nothing better than getting a group of volunteers together. It's real passion from their work has brought that club from. It was actually 10 years today, actually, that their club was taken out of the Football League due to poor management and poor ownership. So it's actually touching that. It's come on the day today where I'm really praising their work. From that, I've come into a full-time role working with the youth team and also the community side, so the Chester Community Trust. Their work is brilliant, and what they do are going into schools and delivering PE. Their work with the elderly, and they come into the stadium and they do talks on their history. So it was really fascinating, and something that they should be proud of. That led to. Go on, sorry.
No, it's really interesting you say. Just sort of picking up on Chester there, Scott. What I find interesting is that I'm sort of thinking back now. You brought back some memories there. When I was working at Bury, we actually played Chester. I was in a performance coaching role there, and we sort of played them at youth and first team level. And I think in some respects, just what you've said there, it voices sort of hope for Bury, in the sense that obviously things haven't gone great in the running of the club there, and it's been well documented in that respect. But it shows how, people like yourself, and if you get good people and there's been a lot of great people, by the way, at Bury who've worked behind the scenes and also at the club, but it does show obviously at the heart, running the club is imperative. But I think in that respect, certainly where Bury's concerned, hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, which you sort of mentioned there for Chester. They're sort of making their way back, but no, sort of carry on. That's something that we sort of can touch base again at some point. I find that really fascinating. But in terms of yourself, and how has that sort of influenced what you do, the work that you've done there?
Well, it goes to show that you don't have to have everything. You don't have to have all the money in the world and all the technology to do the right thing and to be successful. So working with the volunteers at Chester, they were dedicating their time, so they had to make do with what they had, really. And there was a motto that the youth team manager would say, we'll find a way no matter what. So it was hard work, resilience, and dedication, and that came from everyone really. And like you said, going back to Bury, it is a real difficult time in what's happened. However, you've already seen applications being accepted into county leagues now from Bury, so the ball's already rolling. The passion for football fans is unbelievable, and the community around it is something that, obviously, learning from Chester, coming from obviously the incident 10 years ago to where they are now, and they're really excelling, not just on the football pitch, but they're bringing players in from clubs that they've recognised. They're developing the youth players. They've got a full-time education programme set up there, and it was something that it goes from 10 years ago to where they are now. It can happen. So there's a lot of positives there, and obviously going from Bury's perspective, there's a lot of positives that you can look forward to in terms of what's happened. And leading on to that, with my role at Chester, they got accepted from the Premier League to actually run the Primary Stars. So I gained a little bit of experience of working with the Primary Stars there. And then obviously, and the role with obviously Chester, we had healthy links with other Premier League clubs, and that's kind of how I fell into my role with my scouting for a couple of years as well.
That's really interesting stuff. And you mentioned sort of being a scout, and so you've got experience of seeing and going out and seeing players, and no doubt as a scout you probably would have got people sort of getting in touch and maybe emailing you or however they could get in touch. And I think as a parent, I think that sometimes there's a little bit of that sort of bias. We all do it. I know what it's like myself, but the reality is, in my experience too, when I worked in football, people sort of, and I still do now, and people say, well, their son or their daughter sort of got these attributes and this, that and the other. But the reality is, obviously, it's a very competitive game, football, and not everyone's going to make it. So there's a lot of variables to making it. But as a scout, Scott, what do you sort of look for? Obviously, it's a difficult question because depending on the position, but generally speaking, what are some of the things that you sort of look for to identify in players as a scout? What are you sort of looking for yourself in terms of, you either you watch a scout or you go out and see one, or you get some information about someone? What do you sort of focus on yourself?
Personally, it's a tough one really, as I didn't see myself as going into the scouting role. It was something that kind of fell at my feet, and I thought it's an opportunity to see how it works, and it could help me with my coaching as well. So working with the Premier League club, it was a case of what did they want, what was meeting their style, what was their visions, and how they saw it. So for me, it was a case of understanding what they would look for, and it helped me then, because I was only doing it for about 3 seasons. So from when I started to finishing a few months ago, it was great to get that experience. So for me personally, it depends on what the club would like. So it's sometimes you see a child really, really excel, and then you put them into environments that are a little bit different, and they drop. And like you said, it's such a competitive environment, and the percentages of becoming a full-time professional footballer, especially to go into the Premier League, is very, very minimal. I know they do get a little bit of stereotype from parents, but then you get the parents who not so much hound people like obviously scouts. It's a case of they believe that their son or daughter has got exceptional talent, and then obviously the realisation that actually the percentage is so small, and it can be heartbreaking. It can be absolutely heartbreaking for not only coaches but scouts as well, to obviously deliver not the best news to players. It is a tough environment, but like I said, it depends on the club. For me, it was a case of, are they good on the ball? What are they like on the ball? Are they on the ball as much as they possibly can? And I think that now with the model of the DNA of the FA, and you see it now all over, obviously St George's Park, and the videos that they put out with Pete Sturgis, it's so player ball orientated, which I'm such a believer in. Yeah, and absolutely. I think that was something there that helped with me and the club that I was working with how we recognised a potential talent. It was, what were they like on the ball? Were they expressive on the ball? Were they comfortable? And I think it was the 1v1 domination, tenacity, and those are the things I kind of look for. But then again, it was a case of what was their characteristic on a football pitch? What did they do different to someone else? What is their best asset on a football pitch? And some people look at as a player as a whole, and can he do this? Can he do this? Can he do this? Can he do this? Or can we break it down and go, well, what is this person really, really good at that is different to anyone else, that can be effective and can be useful in a team environment? So there's little things there that you'd have to have a look at, but it was tough. Nevertheless, it was very tough. Obviously, recognising players, making notes, and obviously giving them an opportunity is probably the best part of being. When I was a scout, it was recognising some talent and giving them that opportunity, the extra coaching, the extra education from the coaches and from the club. Whether it was successful, or it was disappointment, they've still come away with something. They've come away with experience. They come away with life skills that they won't ever take away from them.
Absolutely. And
I think that's what kind of gets brushed under the carpet. It's the experience of what they've taken in. Yes, it is heartbreaking. I can say it is heartbreaking. However, but what they'll learn and what they will move forward with, that is what they've learned from the experience. So it was tough, nevertheless, but there was a lot of positives to take from it.
Absolutely. That's a really fascinating insight and an honest insight, Scott, because we've got a lot of listeners and a lot of them are into sport, and not just in sport, just generally speaking, even people outside sport. There's disappointment in many areas in terms of you apply for a job, you don't get the job, and there's many people across a broad range of areas. But like you says, I mean, I think it's really important for people to be aware that it's a very competitive industry and it's not easy. Only a few places can make it as professionals, and it's not easy to get there, and staying there is equally as hard. But they're really fascinating insights in terms of what you look for. And I think for me, certainly from what you say and from what I've heard, there has been changes in terms of identifying talent, where I think there certainly was a phase, at least in my experience subjectively, where the certain players that were being identified were based on their physical criteria, where it was, okay, how tall, how strong, how fast can they run? And there was almost a point, Scott, I felt, where what you've mentioned there was starting to get overlooked. Good on the ball and that sort of stuff. And I remember one time I was at a conference, Scott, and I said, this was years ago, this is going back a long time ago, I said, it's quite ironic, you wonder if some of the really good footballers that are playing across Europe and around the world in South America would have got scouted at that point based on criteria. If you look, say, for example, for argument's sake, you take a Messi, his height, and think of him growing up, his attributes, you wonder if the scout would have seen that ability, at least in this country all those years ago. But it has changed, like you said, which is fascinating. I think that's great, because obviously I think there's no greater thing in football than seeing a true footballer. Obviously, it is really, really important, but a true footballer is key. But your role at the Premier League Primary Stars, Scott, tell us a bit about how that sort of works and what you do there and what that all involves.
Yep, so the Primary Stars is linked with the Premier League clubs, Football League clubs, and also the National League clubs. It's the appeal of Premier League and the football clubs that it's there to inspire children to learn, be active, and most importantly, develop life skills. So it came in a couple of years ago, and they're working with schools across England and Wales. And what happens is they go in and we work with 5 to 11-year-olds at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And the staff from the football clubs will go in and they'll deliver sessions in classrooms, playgrounds, and also on the sports field when it's sunny.
Yeah.
Those are the good days. They're the ones where you look forward to on the grass.
Yeah.
So the idea of the Premier Stars is you're working with the class teachers as well as the children. Obviously, the children for me is the main priority. It's their moment. It's their education. It's their learning time. However, it's there to work with the teachers as well. We kind of mentor the teachers for them to become more confident in their delivery, give them a bit more experience so they're more adaptable to their sessions. I think long have gone now off the line drills in the freezing cold with 2 or 3 basketballs that I've got half filled with air that don't bounce. It's about being adaptable. So if a school would like to register with the Premier League primary stars, they're available for resources online for English, maths, PE, and also BSHE. So how it works is we will obviously go into schools and explain how we deliver our primary stars, and we learn from the school itself, the background of the school, their ethos, their visions, how they what do they do that benefits the children. Do they have any SEN children, any disabilities, any with obviously antisocial behaviours? So we target every. It's very diverse in terms of how we work. So, for example, we'll have a class. We'll sit down with the class teacher, and we get to know the class teacher. Who's that person? What do they do outside of school? Why did they become a teacher? It's about building a relationship with the class teacher. We integrate the class teacher into our sessions. We allow the teacher, we share our ideas with the teacher. They're able to deliver sessions, the part of the sessions. Can we bring in the core subjects of the English and Maths in the sessions? Of course we can. And these are the resources that are available. So I've done a dodgeball session a couple of weeks ago, and we worked on, the kids were working on putting sentences together. So what we done was we had a team of 5. We gave them all a word each, and if you were struck by the dodgeball, you had to go out and write your word on the whiteboard, and after 2 minutes, once you've got all your words, you had to try and jumble the words and create a sentence. So
that's amazing.
We can cross our PE into our core subjects. I think that's a big pull from the schools as well. That's
fantastic, Scott. That's really amazing stuff, and I think that's really interesting, and certainly that sort of resonates with me. Many years ago, I used to also deliver education in care homes, and one of the things I used to be conscious of is using activity sports to sort of bring in a curriculum, just like you've mentioned there. I think it's really, really important because everyone learns differently, and how great is that? It's sort of helping them, obviously, confidence, motivation, also physically. That's really fascinating stuff. And how have the teachers responded to that, Scott? How have the teachers generally responded to having someone like yourself there to have these sort of creative games that help engage different parts of the brain?
Well, we have from the Premier League, they're very open to sharing the feedback from teachers. So in terms of numbers, over the past years, the teachers that have been supported are over 8,000.
Wow.
And we've gone into over 1,500 schools that we've engaged in throughout. Obviously, this isn't just obviously the club that I'm working with for now, but it's clubs across the country, and it's getting stronger. And the feedback from the teachers has been, it's changing PE. It's changing the way people see PE.
Yeah.
We don't specifically work on a certain sport. We try to come away from that, and it's part of, obviously it's linked in with the national curriculum. We will develop core fundamental skills, but we will use different sports to kind of introduce that, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you've got a year 6 class, they're getting to the point now where some of the physical attributes are really showing, obviously through athleticism. They need to start working on tactical elements. So if they want to work on attacking and defending, we will come and do a 6-week block or longer, and we will introduce sports that some of them may never have come across before.
Yeah.
That draws out the attacking and defending elements. So it'd be a case of, if you're attacking, can you find space? So there's multiple of sports that you can use there. So you can take away football, you can look at rugby, basketball, handball. I, funny enough, played a sport on Thursday, Quidditch, and it was unbelievable. And I've obviously you've heard of Quidditch from Harry Potter and the books and the films. I've just come out of a course on Thursday on how to play Quidditch without flying around the room and broomsticks. Honestly, it was one of the best 2 hours of my life. And I'm on my way shortly to take a school into the first team to play that. And obviously introduce it. So again, elements of attacking and defending, but with completely different sports, and it's something there that I'm a big believer in.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Scott. There's some great points you've made there, and I certainly think that's great stuff. I think it's really important to look at different sports, and I'm sort of wondering, sort of speaking to you there, I mean, I've experienced, I've sort of worked in the States too and coached out there, and it's one of them where we can, as from the UK, we can bring ideas to the States and vice versa. Do you find that you've sort of been influenced in any way? I mean, I think that the sports in the States are great, and sport in general there is great in terms of learning, but did you find that your experience in the States, Scott, had a positive experience on you being a coach and sort of coming back here and bringing back that sort of, I guess in sport generally over there, sport over there is probably looked at a little bit different to here, in not so much now, but certainly in the past, sport has always been seen as a really, really big deal over there. It's sort of catching on here, and been some great performances in the Olympic Games here, and organisations like yourself and that sort of stuff are sort of bringing it to the paramount. But your experiences of America, do you think that influences the coaches at all, Scott? Or
yeah, definitely. I'd love to go back in the future. I always tell my partner at home, when we're older, I'd love to go and coach a high school team or a college team. That would be a dream role for me. What really did impress me, well, I know it's gone back generations, is the link between the link between the education and the sport.
Absolutely.
I think that is a massive pull on me. For me personally, I think it's massive how the support from the representing your school, representing your college is so important and so significant over in the States compared to the UK. I remember I was working in Louisiana, and I've managed to go and I drove past the Louisiana State University, the Tigers. And it's a wonderful, wonderful stadium. I think quote me if I'm wrong, it's over 100,000 seats a stadium. Yeah, and they've got their own tiger. But I won't go into that one. But but the support from the community around the LSU Tigers and everywhere else across the States is massive. I remember seeing people walking around down the street, walking their dogs in their university colours. It's the education community.
Absolutely,
It's frightening, and I think if we could take a little bit from obviously over there across the pond to here, that may help towards maybe a lesser percentage in terms of antisocial behaviour, attendance, and a bit more passion towards school. I know. Listen, we've all been younger. We've gone to school, and we've not had our good days, and we've not wanted to be there. But maybe having that more of a sport in terms of the education side of it, linked in obviously with our primary stars now, I think it's slowly changing. And I think with the primary stars as well, we work on our PSHE, and we tend to take from the instead of going into the playground or the hall, we'll actually work in the classroom. So we'll use the pull of the Premier League and the football club, and we look at resilience, diversity, self-esteem, and fair play. So it's trying to use that in an education environment and use it in your sport as well. So I suppose we're getting there, but like I said, but the pull of the education, the sport in the States is massive, and that was the big one for me as a coach.
No, you're right for sure, Scott. And I think for me, certainly things have changed here, and they're sort of going forward, and we're seeing the results of that. But I think also as a coach in general, this is just sort of my subjective experience from a coaching point of view. Certainly in America, is you looked at differently in terms of how well respected sort of coaches in sport are. Sport in college there isn't seen as sort of something just on the sideline. It's a big part of the college program, and you're getting like 80,000 people in some colleges come to watch American football, and like you say, it's sort of they sort of really wear it with pride in a big way. Where it's changed a lot here, but I certainly think you can go back years ago where school in general sort of PE was seen as being the lesson that sort of gets in the way of things. And for me, it's a driving force to sort of, like you said, introduce other subject curriculum that not everyone learns the same. And some people are more kinesthetic, more hands-on learners. Some people, really want to develop in different ways. And I think this gives them the option to sort of develop, because in the end, really, how many players are going to make as professionals? But you think, well, these skills are transferable wherever you go, no matter what you do, and your life's going to throw you challenges. And if you've got these sort of skills, you're better placed, you'd think, to handle them. But that's fascinating, Scott. Do you just sort of mindful of time, being kind enough to join us? Are there contact details, Scott, if anyone's sort of interested, or do you have any sort of details if any of our listeners are interested in knowing more about what the program involves or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. So the Premier League Primary Stars is, if you go through if you type in Premier League Primary Stars, it comes straight up on Twitter. It's at PL Communities and hashtag PL Primary Stars, and you'll see across obviously social media and online, even in matchday programs. So any teachers working out there. So it's something there that is growing and growing. They have a saying, the values of the Primary Stars is, when we go into our sessions, we base our rewards on these 4 things. So it's ambitious. So the children will work hard, never give up. Inspiring, so set a great example to others. Connected, so they work well with one another. And finally, be fair. So it's how they consider it and thinking of others. And I think, again, that is the life skills that, especially from when I was doing the scouting and working with the Premier League club, they start slowly instill into the child, and they'll take it as life skills. So it's massive. So any teachers out there that are listening and they want to get involved, look to their nearest professional club, and that's the best way. Or online, and get you free resources. So you're able to get your free football kit, you get equipment and books as well. There's competitions, national competitions, football competitions, reading and writing competitions. At the moment, there's a poetry competition that ends in March. And I think they've had over the past couple of years, they've had 25,000 entries. That's amazing. Again, linking the sport with the education it's a massive pull on the communities.
Yeah, that's amazing. I tell you, I'm sort of listening to you here, Scott, thinking if only they had these resources when I was I'm lecturing now, but it's FE, but when I was teaching younger people years ago, I'm thinking, gee, it's sort of imperfect for me, because I had to sort of improvise to do the best I could, utilising sport as a vehicle, but obviously it's nowhere near as well organised as you guys and have those sort of resources. So I'm sort of sitting here thinking how incredible that is, and it's been really fascinating having you on the show, Scott. I'm sure listeners have really, really had a big eye opener there in terms of what's available. And certainly, we have people in sports listening, but also teachers in many different walks of life. And I certainly think it's fascinating what you guys do. And one of the goals of our show is to increase awareness and participation of sport, and use sport as a vehicle for change, because sport is a big leveler. Wherever you go in the world, sport is huge, and this sort of brings people together. And this is what this show's all about. Scott, it's been great having you on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show. Your host, Petruzzi, Scott Hoather, is giving us a really fascinating insight into the work he does and the Premier League Primary Stars coaching role he has. So thanks again, Scott, for being on the show, and no doubt we'll sort of hear more about your work in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Appreciate it.